A series of attacks, the deaths of high-ranking generals, and threats spreading into the realms of technology and media are being viewed as signs of a dangerous escalatory chain, where the Middle East is no longer an isolated hotspot but is gradually connecting into a broader front. The developments in Isfahan are no longer merely an airstrike. They are seen as a clear signal that the regional situation is entering a new stage of escalation, one that is more dangerous and difficult to control than ever before. The consecutive explosions there carry not only military significance, but are also perceived as a test of the limits of Iran's strategic defense capabilities. Analysts believe this event marks a shift from local conflicts to a form of multi-layered confrontation where parties no longer face off directly, but through networks of proxy forces and indirect strikes. This causes the battlefield to expand not only geographically, but also into various other fields, from military to economics and technology. Notably, the method and timing of the attacks are thought to carry a message of strategic deterrence, aimed not only at Iran, but also sent to relevant parties. Many opinions suggest this is part of a calculated escalatory chain, in which every action carries the potential to trigger a chain reaction. In that context, the Middle East is moving closer to a state of large-scale confrontation, not necessarily an immediate all-out war, but a process of accumulating tension where even a small miscalculation could spark a crisis beyond control. Looking deeper into the issue, the most noteworthy point right now does not lie solely in the Middle East, but in the fact that this conflict is beginning to link directly with the Ukrainian battlefield, and that is what truly concerns many experts. First of all, Ukraine's role is changing very rapidly. From a country primarily receiving military aid, Kyiv has now become an exporter of combat experience, especially in the field of anti-UAV warfare. According to recent reports, more than 200 Ukrainian experts have been deployed to the Middle East to support air defense systems and provide drone countermeasure training for Gulf countries. This is not just technical, it shows that Ukraine is entering another war even without being a direct combatant. Therefore, when information emerges about Iran signaling warnings to Ukraine, the issue is no longer an isolated statement. It reflects a new logic. Any party participating in this warfare ecosystem, even indirectly, can become a target. In other words, the boundaries between allies, technical partners, and targets of attack are being blurred. On the other hand, Russia has also begun to take advantage of this context. Moscow's references to the Botia-Baltic region, raising questions about UAV flight paths and transit capabilities, show they are seeking to expand the Ukrainian conflict space into Europe. If this scenario occurs, the war will no longer be limited to two separate regions, but will begin to form an interconnected conflict structure. And that is exactly the danger. Wars are gradually linking together. The Middle East is no longer separate from Ukraine. These two battlefields have begun to interact, from technology and resources to strategy. An attack in the Gulf could affect air defenses in Kyiv, and conversely, a decision in Europe could trigger a reaction in the Middle East. Parallel to this, the nature of warfare is also changing. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, threat to attack American tech giants like Apple, Google, or Microsoft shows that targets are no longer just military bases, but have expanded to economic and technological infrastructure. This is a notable escalation because it draws the private sector directly into the vortex of conflict. Adding to that, the kidnapping of an American journalist in Baghdad, believed to be linked to pro-Iranian armed groups, is another sign that the war has spread to the media and civilian sectors. Journalists, businesses, and even ordinary citizens can now become impact points in a broader strategy. All these factors are shaping a new type of conflict, often referred to as hybrid warfare. There, the boundary between the military and non-military almost disappears. Missiles and UAVs are only one part. The rest consists of economic attacks, psychological pressure, information control, and the expansion of political influence. And when putting the two puzzle pieces together, the Middle East and Ukraine, the big picture begins to emerge. The world is no longer facing isolated wars, but the risk of a systemic conflict where hotspots link into a network. In such a structure, any fluctuation, however small, can create a ripple effect far beyond prediction. If the event in Isfahan is placed in its proper military context, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The so-called impenetrable shield of Iran's underground tunnel system is perhaps no longer as solid as the country has portrayed for many years. In Iran's military doctrine, underground infrastructure is not merely a place to hide weapons, it is a vital pillar. Tunnels deep within mountains are designed to protect ballistic missiles, UAVs, and even aircraft from preemptive strikes. In a war scenario, this is the strategic reserve that ensures Iran can still counterattack even if caught by surprise. But the problem lies in the fact that the very organization within these facilities creates vulnerabilities. Previously released images show missiles and ammunition arranged along long, high-density corridors with very few independent blast walls. This might be optimal for deployment speed, but it is extremely dangerous when subjected to penetration attacks. If just one point is breached, the entire complex could fall into a domino effect where secondary explosions follow one another, magnifying the destructive power many times over. And that is exactly what modern bunker-buster bombs aim for. Weapons like the American GBU-57 are designed not to destroy the surface, but to penetrate deep into the earth before exploding. When combined with Iran's dense storage structure, they almost turn a strength into a fatal weakness. From a military perspective, this carries immense significance. If underground facilities, once considered the final line of defense, can be penetrated, then Iran's entire doctrine of deterrence will be called into question. It is not just a material loss, but a loss of confidence in the survivability of strategic weapon systems. From here, a question begins to arise. Is Iran's defense technology falling behind the pace of development of modern penetration weapons, while the US and Israel continuously upgrade precision-guided bombs capable of deep penetration and hitting targets with extremely low margins of error? Iran's infrastructure layout seems to still rely on defensive thinking from a decade ago. Alongside the strikes on infrastructure, another development is equally important: the deaths of high-ranking figures in the IRGC. The case of Brigadier General Jamshid Eshaghi is not merely the loss of an officer. He is believed to be directly involved in financial operations, specifically the oil shipping networks aimed at generating revenue for Iran's proxy forces in the region. This shows that the objective of the attacks is no longer limited to destroying hardware, but is shifting to striking the operational structure of the entire system. When a figure in charge of finance is removed, the impact is not just a vacant position, but can disrupt the entire flow of money, the lifeblood of Iran's indirect military activities at various hotspots. In other words, this is a form of strike on strategic logistics, where money, oil, and transport channels play a role no less important than missiles or UAVs. When these links are broken, Iran's ability to maintain influence through forces like Hezbollah or Hamas will also be affected. From this viewpoint, many experts are beginning to hypothesize a broader strategy. Decapitating the system. Instead of direct confrontation on the battlefield, parties choose to strike key points, from infrastructure and personnel to finance, to weaken the opponent from within. This is a less costly approach militarily, but it has higher long-term effectiveness if executed precisely. And when combining both factors, breaking the infrastructure shield and eliminating key links in the apparatus, a clear trend emerges. Modern warfare is shifting toward a high-precision strike model, aimed directly at the opponent's core essence. Looking broadly, what is happening is no longer a collection of isolated hotspots. The Middle East, Ukraine, and even Europe are beginning to link within a more complex structure of tension. Attacks are aimed not only at military bases, but also at strategic infrastructure, businesses, and the financial links behind the war. That is the sign of a new phase of instability, where the line between war and peace is increasingly blurred. There is no official declaration of war, no clear front lines, yet the strikes still occur, continuously and calculatedly. And perhaps the most concerning part lies here. A great war in the 21st century may not begin with a declaration of war, but with the very chains of actions we are witnessing, step by step, silent but increasingly irreversible.